Hello, everyone, ladies, gentlemen, and entity folks everywhere. Hello. Hello, friends. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about first world leftism. I'm not the first person to talk about first world leftism. In fact, EJ from Non-Compete has done a video on this subject, and I think it's worth looking into. I think it's worth checking it out. I will put a link in the description to that video. I should have thought about that ahead of time. I do think there's a lot of other leftists, not including myself, but I guess also including myself in this case, because I'm starting to speak on it as well, who I feel do speak on this, and they're not heard loud enough, such as overthrow media, also St. Andrewism, and Professor Flowers. I think these are all people who speak on first world leftism with a critical analysis, and I think their analysis is well founded. I usually tend to agree with what they have to say on the subject, and I think for a while even I was kind of saying something about it in the past, but it didn't always land very well, because it was kind of rooted in kind of like being ignorant of my own role in society and this white supremacist culture that we're forced to live under. So that's why, well, let me just back up 1 second. White supremacy is a lack of culture. It's an erasure of culture. When people say white culture or white supremacist culture, to correct myself on this, most people tend to think that they're referring to European culture. European culture is diverse, as in not monolithic. You go to France, you go to England, you go to Germany, you go to Romania, any Eastern nation, an Eastern European nation. I mean, you're gonna get a whole diverse array of cultures, and I think to call all of that white culture is a bastardization of what would already be European culture, and I think it further demonstrates kind of like the tendency of what white supremacy is. It's a revisionism of what culture is, and I think a lot of leftists, including myself, tend to fall into a trap of that sort. I do want to make it clear that when I am critiquing privileged leftists in the first world, I am critiquing myself. I want to make that clear. I am fully aware of my privilege, and I plan to use this platform to push against that. I don't know if I will succeed, but I will try my damn hardest. I am not a savior. I don't want to be seen as a savior. And, hold on. Thank you for telling me that the music is too loud. Moderator, my apologies for the music being too loud. Let me know if that's better. I should have said something about it. I feel awful because now I started this whole stream. There's 3 viewers. You know what? Wouldn't be a leftist stream if there wasn't fuck ups. Anyway, let's continue where we left off. My privilege is to be recognized, and I want to use this platform that I maintain to push against that privilege. Not to deny it, but to critique it for what it is. And I hope that I do that. I hope I succeed. If I don't succeed, please let me know. But I largely want to critique white leftism and where we can do better, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense there. So this is also off the cuff. I have no notes. I have no script. I hope I don't fuck up. I already did earlier. So let's talk about let's talk about our role in the revolution. I feel like a lot of times, like, leftists have like some sort of like I mentioned earlier, like a savior complex, even that, you know, I'm a white leftist, I've read all this theory, and I know about capitalism and how capitalism is the private ownership of the means of production, which leads to exploitation and the expansion of imperialism and all this stuff. And I think understanding that is important, but when you receive that understanding, when you take the time to do that understanding, it's a whole other thing to apply that into something, right? It's important to, like, when you have it like that critical analysis of capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, the state, you know, hierarchy of any kind, you know, it's important that you kind of have a stance against it, or that you understand why you have a stance against it. I know a lot of fascists who claim, I mean, they could be lying for all I know, but I do know of fascists who were once anarchists and once communists, Leninists or Maoists of the variety of sorts, and then they somehow became fascists. And usually that's because they do take this analysis of hierarchy and capitalism and class conflict and the struggle, and then they think, well, I could put myself on top. Screw all these other people. Like, you know, the system should be working for me and explicitly for me, and I should be accelerating the system and its violence so that it works solely for me. And that's usually what, like, you know, what drives fascists to do bad things. Like, and that's not all fascists. Actually, a lot of fascists are victims of state propaganda, you know, Fox News. When I say state propaganda, I'm also referring to, like, corporate propaganda, usually funded by the state or within the beneficiary of the state or nation state, if you will, like Fox News and CNN, NBC, the media monopoly, if you will. And this reactionary tendency, I feel it's very easy for white leftists to see this and to punch at the wrong bag, the wrong punching bag. I feel that a lot of white leftists, including myself, we feel that it is necessary to punch other white people. Not to defend white people, but we need to remember who is perpetuating white supremacy. It's the state that is maintaining a culture of erasure. It is the state that is creating this culture of erasure that we have to abolish. And I don't mean that you shouldn't yell at your grandpa who is a fucking reactionary piece of shit. Please do. Please fucking cause a stink this Thanksgiving. But when we talk about, like, dismantling hierarchy and institutional power, we're specifically talking about these institutions that perpetuate these forms of class struggle. And there's various forms of recognizing that, including recognizing what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse this Friday, right? A lot of people think that that's just an in-court, you know, failure of the state. But no, it goes a lot deeper than that. Because, I mean, Kyle Rittenhouse has a huge following. Kyle Rittenhouse has a cult following even. He has, like, men and women who are twice his age who wanted him to be convicted or be verdicted not guilty. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, but you know what I mean. And if that were the case, it benefits them because then they have an incentive. They have a way to loop around shooting down protesters, peaceful protesters. They have a way to legally get away with taking their Ford pickup trucks and just running over a bunch of protesters. and they can legally get away with it. You know, the judge saying that the protesters are not victims, which is a huge fucking red flag in itself. I think there's a huge red flag in the fact that Kenosha was closed down during this time. I don't know if it's still closed down, but Kenosha, in terms of the school district, 6 schools had to be closed down because they felt that it was possible that some far-right fucking piece of shit would go on another mass shooting spree, you know, Columbine style or whatever. So I feel that, like, our class analysis of state structure and class structure and our class analysis, it genuinely needs to improve. And I think that does help to do so on a local level. For example, when I was in LA, I've lived in both very poor neighborhoods and very rich neighborhoods. Sometimes I stayed in the rich neighborhoods, you know, just for a couple days so I can eat well, because I have friends and family that live out there. And then, you know, I had to do whatever I had to do in poorer neighborhoods, whether if I had a job or whether that was where I was going to be staying more permanently and things like that. But my class analysis of Los Angeles at the time was that there's still a lot of redlining to be observed. There's like entire communities that are completely cut off from each other, like as if it's intentional. And the way the structure in the system is designed with that redlining in mind, it's not just to prevent people from being able to vote with, you know, any form of like legitimacy, you know, any form of kind of like ability to maintain your like ability to vote. I don't know if I'm saying that word correctly. They can't ensure that everyone gets a vote when there comes an election. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's a form of redlining, gerrymandering, if you will. And, you know, on top of that, you know, the amount, like the number of services that are available to marginalized and colonized people in those sectioned off neighborhoods are not the same as those that are in richer neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And I think, you know, if my assumption is correct, that's everywhere. That's like everywhere else, basically. It's like in every state in the United States where there is a densely populated area, and then there are suburbs and rural areas that stem out of that. And that doesn't mean like rural areas are poor. I'm sorry, no. That doesn't mean rural areas are rich by default. There are rich people in rural areas, but a lot of the time, rural places are very underdeveloped. And when I say underdeveloped, I don't mean that they've never developed anything. I mean they're fucking robbed. I mean, look at Flint, Michigan, for example, where the city's drinking water has been systemically fucking poisoned to save money. Like, to save money on fucking, like, toxic waste dumping, for fuck's sake. Their drinking water over there is, like, holistically yellow. And it has been for a very long time. For more than a decade. I remember Elon Musk was gonna fucking, like in 2017, he pledged to fucking single-handedly clean all of the water in Flint, Michigan. That still hasn't happened yet, Elon Musk. I don't know what the fuck you're doing. Are you too busy, like, trying to go to Mars? What's going on there? And that's really, like, where I'm seeing, like, the cultural divide between, like, first world leftists and third world leftists, global south leftists, if you will, or revolutionaries in the global south. In my opinion, like, first world leftists are very complicit with the way things are. Like, they won't express complicity out loud. They will even express a deep resentment for fascism, capitalist exploitation, police brutality. But their approaches and analysis to their revolutionary potential of how to tackle these things, as well as, like, you know, their understanding of it, like the nuance, just the way that, like, first world leftists deeply think about this stuff in the grand scheme of things, is very limited. One example is, I've seen some leftists argue against, like, marginalizing colonized people owning firearms. Personally, if you ask me, I believe immigrants, whether they're registered or not, should be armed. Like, they should be armed, like, for their own protection. And I've said that before on stream. When I did that, Secret Services came to my house. And I lost a lot as a result of that. And I don't care what the Secret Services think in terms of me making this video now. Y'all ain't gonna thought police me. I still think immigrants should be armed. And I think colonized and marginalized people should be armed. That doesn't mean that every single one of you should be armed. I don't think everyone needs a gun. I'm not a gun enthusiast. I'm not trigger happy. I don't think it's necessary for every single person to have a gun. Just as much as I don't think that every far-right fascist paramilitary dipshit or every cop should have a gun. TBH, those things shouldn't even exist in the first place. But since we're in this class conflict together between marginalized and colonized people versus reactionaries and the state with guns, I think that there is an incentive to really campaign for marginalized and colonized people to own firearms. Like, it really says something when paramilitary dipshits can go to a protest with a firearm, even if they don't shoot, by the way. They're doing it for a very specific reason, to cause fear. You think that they ruled Kyle Rittenhouse, like, legitimately not guilty? You think maybe it had something to do with the fucking crowd of armed fucking goddamn fascists outside their fucking courthouse, ready to fucking do another January 6th in their courthouse? You think that's perhaps maybe has something to do with it? Like, imagine if the judge said that Kyle Rittenhouse was guilty on all charges. Imagine if that would happen. Do you think they would just say, oh, you know what, the system just kind of did its thing, it did its honest thing, and now we're gonna just sit by and be happy about it? They didn't even allow Joe fucking Biden to be president during Jan 6. Like, of course they failed, but this wasn't a failure on their part. They succeeded. And I'm gonna be real with you. It makes me really angry. It makes me actually very angry to know that not only is Kyle Rittenhouse proven not guilty, and not only are fascists more empowered, more, like, they feel like it's okay to cause harm in public. You know, they're not gonna get in trouble with the state or anything, or with the law, because the law doesn't mean jack shit to them at this point. But it makes me even more frustrated. I'm going to say this from the bottom of my heart. It makes me extremely fucking frustrated that leftists are not doing jack all about it. Like, I know that people are protesting, and believe me, you should protest. You should be safe when you protest. But it makes me really fucking angry that this talk about leftists not owning weapons, not owning firearms for their safety, it's something that is a huge talking point that has actually led to our society being more unsafe for colonized and marginalized peoples. I think it's extremely reactionary, and I think a lot of leftists, even people who identify as communists or anarchists, socialists for that matter, any variant of those, like, they are completely blind to the history of gun control in the United States. Now, don't get me wrong, gun control has its merits. I think that there's something to be said about like, you know, certain people, like privileged, far-right, fascist dipshits owning firearms and obtaining them legally, in fact, to commit mass shootings. Like, a lot of these mass shootings are caused by paramilitary fuckasses owning firearms legally, possessing firearms legally. Of course, what they did with the firearm broke the law, but a lot of the times they either kill themselves or they get away with it in court, or they get a very flimsy sentence compared to a lot of black people who are, you know, sentenced to prison or life in jail, or a death sentence for something far less severe, like cannabis possession charges and shit like that. I think there's something serious to be said about that, but more importantly, I think there is something else to be said about the history of gun control and how gun control, you know, even in its inception was racist. You know, the Black Panthers were a paramilitary group, a socialist revolutionary group that I mean, they didn't just use firearms to do what they did. I mean, I've talked about it in previous videos. They had breakfast programs for children. They had seminars that educated people on like revolutionary, like not only just ideology but praxis. And they've done all sorts of stuff that was, I think, fundamentally important for a thriving society. Especially to counteract police brutality, they even did like what they would call, I guess they would call it like cop patrol or pig patrol. They were the ones to coin the term pig to describe a law enforcement officer. But I think like what they did in terms to counteract police brutality was so effective, because we're talking about a car full of Panthers, Black Panthers, tailgating, well, not tailgating, but following at a distance a law enforcement officer vehicle. And when that law enforcement officer pulls over a black man, they come out with their guns and they say to the person who is in the driver's seat, "You know your rights," and then they recite their rights. And I think that was good, because for a while it did stop law enforcement police brutality. I think that's credit where credit needs to be given, and I think it's something that needs to be done again. I think with the passing of gun control and the inevitability of what would then become the state's response to the Black Panthers being COINTELPRO, I think it let down a kind of like a reactionary misunderstanding from leftists, especially white leftists, who do not holistically understand why it is important to give power to the people. Literally, that's their fucking phrase. Power to the people. For fuck's sake. That's their catchphrase right there. Power to the people. Shit, you're like, seriously. And when leftists critique marginalized and colonized people owning firearms for the sake of community defense and for the sake of being able to to fight for self-determination and things like that, for their autonomy, for their freedom, it's a very privileged position. It's a very privileged place to come from, because you have to think about where that person is coming from. That person probably doesn't have to worry about getting shot. That person probably never lost a friend or have been in line of gunfire before. Now, that's not always true. That is a generalization, and there are people who have lost their lives to firearm, and there is something to be said about firearm being a leading cause of suicide, of course, but I think that is the culture around firearm, right? The culture around firearm is to kill. I think people are nearsighted with the context of firearm being to kill on an imperialistic level, and so therefore they see firearm implicitly for the sake of imperialistic uses. And I think that's a very colonist and very privileged way of looking at it. I think those people really have a lot of like growing up and developing to do, especially since they're not. I don't want to say the word educated, but they're not read up. They're not informed on not just the racist history, but also what a thriving gun culture can look like. I don't like guns at all. I hate guns, but I would rather feel more safe in a culture where, fuck it, maybe guns, firearms was like a class in school, like primary school, like where in Vietnam they teach you how to use firearms and grenades and shit. I feel that there would be so much more safe environments in not just this country but the whole world if people truly understood like the role of a firearm, being that the role of a firearm is to protect yourself or to hunt or trap, if you will. And I think understanding the rules of owning a firearm, for example, rule number 0, always assume a firearm is loaded, as in don't point it at anything that you don't intend to shoot. If you assume that it is loaded, you're pretty much not going to put your finger on the trigger. Like, even that rule in itself, it tells you what the other 2 rules are, kind of indirectly, because it's just like, if you assume the firearm is loaded, you're not going to do something careless with it. And usually the rules that follow along with it are rules that specifically imply that, you can't fuck around with a firearm. They say fuck around and find out. Yeah, I would not like to find out what happens when you fuck around with a firearm, personally. And I think that there needs to be a culture that is enthusiastically teaching how to use firearms safely. And also a culture that is enthusiastically giving firearms to those who are in need of firearm, who need to fight off those who are breaking into their homes, far-right fascist dipshits, Proud Boys, Patriot Front, traditionalist jackoffs, and whatever. And I think this debate around it is a waste of fucking time. So another thing I want to talk about when it comes to first world leftists. Oh, by the way, if you want to learn more about firearm, I would look up Tactical Girlfriend. She's really knowledgeable, more so than I am on firearms. Her whole channel's about it. I'll put a link in the description as well to that. If I don't, remind me. But anyway, I want to move on to the next thing, and that is there's a lot of people who are afraid to protest, not necessarily because of what's going to happen to them, but there are leftists who again agree with the analysis of capitalism, why capitalism is detrimental, police brutality, this all, we've been through this already. But they're against protesting, they feel that there's a necessity for respectability politics. I think respectability politics is fine and dandy if you are speaking to someone who maybe you're close to, or maybe if even in a professional setting where you find yourself having to talk about this stuff, and then you need to maintain a certain level of posture, whatever, I don't know. I'm autistic. You think I give a shit about being professional? Like, I don't give I mean, literally my BRB screen's right there. I don't give a rat's ass about being professional, but that's not my point. My point is, however, is that this weird kind of like desire for respectability politics is completely unfounded and baseless. Like, I've seen people, like, I remember during the George Floyd uprising during the summer of 2020, where I legit saw leftists online debating as to whether or not they should have ACAB on their signs, or that they should be, whether or not they should be graffitiing, tagging walls, or burning like buildings or precincts or cars or whatever. Again, that's a very like privileged stance. Like, I don't care like if you think the state needs to be abolished and you're still saying this. Like, that's a very like very like safe, cozy stance. It tells me that you never, it feels like, at least, I could be wrong again on this assumption, but when people say this, it demonstrates to me that they've never been confronted with any of the things that the people who are out there protesting has had to go through before. I think, even if, like, one thing I can maybe give it, like, constructive criticism for on situations like this, is even if, like, say you're a white leftist like myself, and you've never experienced racism on a systemic level, I think that there's still, while there's not entirely complete parallels to this, there's still like an intersectional understanding to be had for what oppression looks like, and how we can maybe understand, but not holistically internalize, what oppression looks like to someone else. So for me, I deal with ableism and transphobia. I am not a victim of racism. I think when I was young, I believed I was a victim of racism, and I believe that my beliefs then are baseless, because after years of learning about what systemic racism looks like, racism doesn't look the same to me in theory as it does to Black, Indigenous people of color. So with that said, like, I can still understand where my own oppression lies, and I can still use that understanding of my own oppression to sympathize and to I'm looking for the word here. I want to say sympathize, but also to kind of put myself into their shoes. Again, not holistically. You can't do that. Like, the system isn't going to treat you differently because you're understanding the experiences of someone that is not you. But I think taking that moment to try to really understand why these people are angry in the first place, why these people are in the streets, why they are causing destruction that is, let's be real here, a lot of the destruction that you see at these protests is necessary. Police precinct, I mean, for fuck's sake, that police fucking department killed George Floyd in Minneapolis. Like, you're gonna get mad because the people in Minneapolis burned down a precinct? You serious? Like, you're a leftist? Really? What are you doing? Like, burning down trash cans, for fuck's sake. Even going with the stereotype. Like, there's no fiber in my body that I can achieve to sympathize with someone who is complaining about people protesting, whether it be through violent means or non-violent means. And actually, let's this is a great time to transition to the difference between violence and non-violence. I wanna give credit to Kamadot's Alter. I don't know how he feels about me. I wish him well and the community well. But I want to thank him for introducing this general idea to me. You can also read Peter Chelderler's book about how nonviolence protects the state. And it's a really good book. You can also watch Radical Reviewers, I think 2 videos on the subject, actually. I think he did 2 whole videos. One was Aaron from Re-Education. Anyway, nonviolence. I think a lot of the time the discussion of violence versus nonviolence is pretty much in tandem with respectability politics. I think a lot of the times leftists are very afraid to say, let's punch fascists, right? In theory, hypothetically, in a video game. But even then, it's just like, we do this because we're afraid of the state finding a reason to pin us down, to arrest us, to give us some kind of incriminating incitation. And I think that part, I think, is valid. But I think the moral kind of merit argument for nonviolence is, again, baseless, because the state is violent. If you don't believe the state is violent, if you never come to that conclusion that the state or capitalism or white supremacy or patriarchy, transphobia, homophobia, any of these racism, any of these structures of oppression, if you've never come to the conclusion that any of these structures are violent to you or to really anyone else, and that you feel that there's at least some part of that is fundamental or necessary, then to me, that demonstrates complicity. Sometimes I see these arguments for defunding the police as opposed to abolishing the police. Now, I want to make it clear that I am for defunding the police. The police they don't deserve money. They don't deserve jack shit. Seriously, they don't in fact, actually, what's fascinating here, I want to try to see if I can find this thing I found recently, today actually, and it has to do with crime in Los Angeles. It's a statistic that was posted by the LASD. I don't think I can find it, and I'm disappointed. Wait, is this it? Is this it? Yes, it is it. Okay, I'm gonna quickly just crop it, just so I can, yeah, okay, I'm gonna post it to you. It's on screen so y'all can see it. I wanna make sure that y'all know what I'm talking about. So this is not misconstrued in any way. Darn, I really wish my computer was not a bitch. There we go, okay. So, let's take a look at this real quick. Stay still. Hold still. Okay, crime stats in Los Angeles County, October 1st, 2021, as compared to 2019. So, as you can see, there's an increase of what they consider to be crime, unlawful shooting, which is really, okay, unlawful shooting, that's weird, because if, it's arguable as to whether or not police shootings are lawful at this point. That's up for debate. But everything else seems to be going up, right? Crime seems to be going up. And allegedly, arrests are going down. However, this is a statistic that is being played by those who are in law enforcement in Los Angeles as an argument against defunding the police. However, police funding has increased. like within the last 2 years, in 2019, 2020, 2021, in fact. Like, they got like if I remember correctly, a $3.2 billion budget, like, this year. And their rate in crime apparently went up. So in theory, crime still exists. Like, it still exists. In fact, it got worse. And yet, like, the police got more money. Keep in mind, I've talked about this before, the police in LA has gangs. Like, gangs in which, in the same fashion that a dare officer would teach you what a gang is in elementary school. So I am for defunding the police. The police don't need jack shit. But I also believe that the police as an institution, as an entire institution, as a functioning institution, it should be abolished. And it's not necessarily just because I hate the police. Oh, of course I hate the police. I'm never gonna shut the fuck up about how much I hate the police. The police should absolutely fucking be abolished. I could tell you all kinds of things as to why I hate the police. I have videos about it even. But the fundamental thing that I think people, especially leftists, tend to forget is the role of the police and like what the police's role is, like function in society, or rather for the state. We always have to re-emphasize here that the role of the police is to protect private property. It is to protect the state. It is within the interest of the state for the police to defend capital or capital accumulation. You will find police more present in protests because protests question the status quo. Protests are there to question the means in which the state exploits its people, and the state makes money on exploiting its people. This is not just through the Marxian analysis of capitalist exploitation and alienation, that part too, but also with the way that the free market pushes for deregulation in the capitalist market. We're talking about like NAFTA, the GATT treaty, the cease TPP, these things like that, where these policies, especially if they're multinational and even global to some degree, are primarily focused on the profitability of a corporation or several corporations, or the profitability of corporations in any given first world nation, and the suppression of workers' rights and environmental protection. And I think that and this includes like smogging. This includes polluting. This includes oil dumping or toxic waste dumping. This includes creating workers' rights violations in countries where it's easier to get away with that stuff. Even you can't legally cite or prosecute the CEO of Walmart because they use child labor in Bangladesh or whatever. You can't do that because there's laws to protect them with that. Deregulation as well. And that's what the police protects. Their primary role is to protect that. If there's a bank robbery and there's a murder, where do you think the police are going to go first? Or even at all? They're going to go to the bank robbery first. And they have to, and I'm kind of even quoting Michael Parenti in this respect, kind of like briefly quoting him, because yes, even if like the bank robbers got away with the money that was necessary, the police still need to maintain social control. Because if there is an expropriation of monetary value, then monetary value means nothing and capitalism collapses. Their role, the police's role in society, is to protect private property. It is not to protect the people. I even made a whole fucking video about this, like on why the police do not protect the people. They just fundamentally do not protect the people. There's even laws, like the one that I stated. I believe it was Warren versus the Supreme Court of District Columbia, where the police don't have. It was ruled that the police don't have a fundamental priority to protect you. They don't have a special relationship with the people that incentivizes them to protect you. They don't. It's a social stigma. In fact, actually, a lot of the propaganda that we see on TV these days, I'm going to use the word propaganda. I've had people laugh at me for using the word propaganda. And I feel that that's bullshit. Because it's real. It's really there. Watch the show Cops, for crying out loud. Watch Andy Griffin. Randy Griffith, whatever. Fuck it. Watch any of these fucking shows where they completely pervert the image of a police officer to be more wholesome, to be more just the jolly good old officer trying to whatever. I don't know. Look at Paw Patrol, for fuck's sake. Paw Patrol is, in my opinion, and this is kind of weird because I've never thought I'd see myself in this position before, just for a different reason though. Paw Patrol is extremely predatory. I think it feels weird when I say this too, and I guess I'm getting off track, but I do want to make this final point. I remember growing up, parents were really skeptical of Pokemon and and what it's gonna do to the kids. And I think there is some truth to it. Pokemon and Nintendo and the Pokemon Company and Game Freak, they benefit off of the sales of Pokemon merchandise and the show and the games and all that. And I do understand why parents would see this as predatory. At the same time, I still play Pokemon today. But with Paw Patrol, this is different. This is different in the fact that it teaches kids to unconditionally support law enforcement. It is to paint a picture that is uncritical of abusive authority. If you are raised from childhood to believe that law enforcement is unconditionally good, then you're going to behave in a way that assumes that law enforcement is unconditionally good, especially when they're not. And that's how we got Kyle Rittenhouse even. And I feel like a lot of these leftists, they'll always say, you know what, I see the police brutality. I see how it's just completely corrupt. But we need the police so we can be safe. Or we need to reinvent the police or something. There's gotta be a new police. We need a militia, one leftist had told me, to protect our nation from terrorists. Well, then, there's several things wrong with that. I mean, we already went through how the police's fundamental role is to protect the state. But then they mentioned the fucking military. And they believe that the military is a necessity. I just find it just a complete fucking, again, divorce from reality. And even a divorce from their own principles that they claim to hold. Because they don't understand the history of U.S. imperialism. I think recently what's been going on in the last 50 years, more so than the last 250 years, there's been a lot of focus on Islamic terrorism when it comes to foreign policy. And I think as a result of that, there's been a lot of Islamophobia that has stemmed from that. And I think there's been a culture that is bred from that. So if there's a culture of Islamophobia, and even if you're a leftist and you recognize that this Islamophobia exists and how Islamophobia is harmful, you still have a lot of deprogramming to do about this, because Al-Qaeda didn't happen in a vacuum. ISIS didn't happen in a vacuum. I've talked about this several times on my channel, where I talked about the U.S. imperialist invasion, coup d'etat in 1953 in Iran, and how that eventually led to the Shah royal family taking over, and how the Shah royal family was primarily an interest for U.S. foreign trade until 1976, when there was so much of their radical opposition killed off, that when the Iranian Revolution came, what came after that was fundamentalist, Islamicist, nationalist, far-right extremists, like Ayatollah Khomeini. I mean, do I dare fucking talk about what Ayatollah Khomeini is guilty of? Holy shit. We're talking about a man who has given the death penalty for people kissing in public, children singing and dancing, playing music. Holy shit. And you can't just say that it was the Iranians who created this. That is completely unfounded and completely privileged and ignorant even. I feel like I might be missing something here and there in my critique of white leftists. But I also think that there's some other things to be highlighted about. For example, anti-colonial activism, if you will. I think Vosh is a more extreme case, but I will use Vosh for a punching bag, as an example, if you will. And I'm pretty sure Vosh is gonna wiggle his way to this timestamp, and he's gonna wiggle his way and make a big ass stream about how I'm some triggered SJW. Whatever. Go fuck yourself, Vosh. Holy shit. But more importantly, Vosh doesn't seem to understand that he, too, lives in a very privileged, in his case, wealthy lifestyle. Being that when he talks about leftist issues, or even not just leftist issues, but anti-colonial issues or things like that, he comes from a place of someone who has never had to deal with this stuff. And that's not necessarily bad on its own, having never have dealt with this. Although I think it's important that if you're a white leftist, that you do take some time to actually learn about this stuff. Learn about what black nationalism is. Learn about the land back movement. Learn about what self-determination means and what nationalism and self-determination means between leftists and white nationalists. Not even just leftists, but people of color. I meant to say, I misspoke there. Palestinian nationalism is not the same as white nationalism. Palestinian nationalism can even be, differentiated from Israeli nationalism, being that Israeli nationalism is a mythological form of nationalism that believes that Jewish people are holistically Israeli, white, colonizers. And I think that's a loaded statement if you're Jewish. If you're Jewish and someone is saying that Jewish people are of the white race or are monolithically Israeli, I feel like a lot of Jewish people, especially in the Jewish diaspora, and especially a lot of Jewish, like, folks who I am friends with even, would express how that is not true, and how that is a revision of history. So, Palestinian nationalism is not the same as Israeli nationalism, just as how black nationalism is not the same as white nationalism. And I feel that Vosh is stuck in this fucking barrier. I feel like so many people have explained this shit to him, and he's still, like, pushing this idea that all nationalism is bad. Like, no, Vosh, no one's asking you to be a black nationalist. You can't be a black nationalist. Like, you still are a very fucking colonizer goddamn piece of shit. And that shows in your praxis. And I think it's important that you do take the time to truly learn. Not just like read tweets on Twitter. Not just like read 2 sentences from Angles, for fuck's sake. I mean to really fucking learn about these cultures and why they are important. I feel like some fucking buck-ass piece of shit in the comment section, I'm sure I can already see it in my head. I can already see it happening. It's gonna tell me that Vosh raised money for Palestinian refugees, that Vosh did this for Black Lives Matter. Listen, I didn't say Vosh was bad, like holistically. But at the same time, you need to uphold Vosh to the standard that you would hold every other leftist. You don't just give Vosh the pat on the fucking back just because he's Vosh, or if he's Destiny, or Xander Hall. Fuck, I mean, I like Bad Empanada, but even if Bad Empanada steps out of line, hold him accountable too. If I step out of line, hold me accountable too. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Bad Empanada is Australian or New Zealand, but I could be wrong. Zealander. I could be wrong. Please correct me. I know he lives in Argentina. I don't know if he's from Argentina. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I apologize if I misspoke on that one. Anyway, but I'm just saying, like, just because we have a platform doesn't mean we're, we're susceptible to criticism. And I do think that white leftists do need to take that time to really learn about what imperialism is and how it impacts marginalized communities. And I think I'm gonna wrap up this sort of like rant with one last thing. Not a conclusion, but more like one last main topic that I feel is super important. This one I feel is personal to me, and I feel that it's time that we really had this conversation, especially in the light of white leftists. Excuse me. I want to see more accountability. I think one of the biggest problems with the US empire is there is no accountability anywhere. No one is taking accountability. The police is not taking accountability. State is not taking accountability. People who hurt others are not taking accountability. And it stems from the kind of like this culture that we built on saving face. I think saving face kind of like stems from, and I could be wrong, but it stems from fundamentalist religious persecution. Saving face of the priest, or saving face of the abusive uncle, or saving face of someone who is an influencer. And I think that has a primary problem that has bled into the leftist community, working class communities. spaces where there is organizing, spaces where there are clubs, spaces where there are people who socialize. Families suffer from this. Friendships suffer from this. Relationships, platonic and romantic, sexual relationships suffer from this. I feel that a lot of people are afraid of saying, I'm sorry. I feel that a lot of people are afraid of owning that they have hurt other people. And I think a lot of people really have a lot of growing up to do. There has been a lot of people that I've been close to, and I think some of you know who I'm talking about. But there are more people than just that person that I'm referring to, who they don't see accountability as something to have a recovery of, not just like the person doing the abusive behavior, but also the survivor, as well as the community around that relationship. I remember crying one time because I knew of something that someone else was doing to someone else. And I was crying in my car because all of our friends, the whole friend group, was not speaking to each other. There was a very awkward, hostile silence that just didn't want to communicate. And that really broke my heart because I loved every single one of those people. And now I couldn't be friends with them. I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't talk to them without picking a side, and I didn't really want to. Not because I wanted to be a centrist, but because, especially in that situation, I didn't know all the facts, I didn't know all the details, and I feel guilty as a result of that. Not only that, but it's just like, can you imagine how everyone else feels? Because one person won't take accountability for the actions that they have done to hurt another person or to hurt multiple people. I want to see more accountability happening in our world, in our society, and in our culture. I want to see more gun safety being taught. I want to see, I want to see things in school that should be taught in school. For example, I want sex ed to be taught in a way that teaches consent, boundaries, building relationships. I want that to be a normal thing. I want there to be critical race theory being taught in school. Because if the system is going to crash because people now understand critical race theory on a more general level, then the system doesn't deserve to exist in the first place. I want to see critical race theory taught, and I want it to be taught unabridged and from the perspective of the colonized, so that people can understand the context in which the empire, that is the U.S. empire, was built on. I want to see more slave revolts being taught in school. I want to hear about John Brown. I want to hear about actual healing subjects being taught in school. The subjects in which children will benefit from as they get older. I remember, I'm gonna be serious here for a second. I guess I am being serious, but you know what I mean. I gotta back up a second. I was racist towards Armenian people, actively racist towards Armenian people when I was in middle school. I was brainwashed by my mom's boyfriend at the time, who also hated Armenian people, and we lived in an Armenian community. But I think what helped me begin my kind of deprogramming of that was when there was an outcry for there to be a recognition for the Armenian genocide that took place in 1915, perpetrated by the Young Turks And I think, while I didn't understand it holistically back then, I knew that there was something afoot. There was something to learn about that. So there was a seminar in school about the genocide. And so for the first time, I think, we learned about a genocide that took place in Armenia that was perpetrated by Turkey. And then we later learned about the Holocaust. And I think that was great because not only did we get context for the Holocaust, but we then got to learn more about our community. It was, I think, one of the most healing things that I think we ever got in school. Which is shameful, not because of the act itself, but because that's the only thing we really learned that was healing. To learn about something that should not happen again, that our country is still doing. Some of you may be wondering if, like, the United States recognizes the Armenian genocide. The country doesn't, or the state doesn't, rather. Or Barack Obama is the only one who has ever mentioned or acknowledged that the Armenian genocide happened. And that's not really a compliment on Obama. That's a critique of the state and every president besides him. And some people may wonder why that is. Well, Turkey is a huge player in NATO, the North American Trade Organization. And Turkey and the US empire are both players in that shit. Or North Atlantic, not North American, North Atlantic Trade Organization. I misspoke on that. So the United States does have an economic beneficiary with Turkey, not to mention Turkey is a huge trading port through not just the rest of Asia, but through the Mediterranean Sea and stuff. So that makes the United States complicit with genocide. Don't even get me started with genocide in the Holocaust and how the United States played its role on that. Don't even get me started on that. I plan to make a video on that soon on how the United States helped the Holocaust. We'll save that for another day. My point is, though, is that I feel that there is not enough action being done by first world leftists. And I think it's rooted from the lack of understanding of how real this shit is. How real all of this is. All of this shit is extremely real. And we sometimes we don't even know it. Sometimes, including myself, we're a little bit divorced from it. It feels like sometimes when I'm having a good day, I somehow remember all of this stuff. And I think to myself, holy shit. Like, I'm feeling great. I can only imagine how people of color are dealing with life right now. I wonder what they're going through sometimes. I try to put myself in their shoes. You know, I try to wonder what, like, you know, indigenous nations are doing on their reservations and how they're trying to survive. They've got a suicide rate that is, I think, unmatched. They've got resources stolen from them, their treaties breached by the US Empire and Canada, not to mention Australia for that matter. And they also have to deal with colonial violence that still stems for the last over 500 fucking years. Even before the empire was born, they've had to deal with systemic genocide, ethnic cleansing of the shit. Adolf Hitler was inspired by it. He wrote about it in his book, Mein Kampf. Not only that, for those who are wondering if Hitler was a socialist, he was not a socialist. He fucking hates socialists. He even wrote about that in the same book, Mein Kampf. calling his party National Socialist was a move of optics. Just much in the same way that the Klan, or rather the alt-right, the general alt-right, has divorced itself from Sieg Heil and started using the OK sign to signal white power. I want to see more like action from leftists in the same context that we see action in Greece, anarchists in Greece, anarchists and communists in Chile. I want to see like the same kind of resistance that we see in Haiti. I want to see more like community building. I want you to fucking talk to your neighbors. I want you to talk to your friends. I want you to attend like local social gatherings if possible. I want you to go to protests. I want you to be safe, however. I want you all to be safe. But when we talk about these things like firearm, when we talk about the police, and when we talk about like, you know, capitalist exploitation and self-determination of people of color, colonized and marginalized peoples, please, for the love of God, listen. You're not a leader. I'm not a leader. I'm not your leader. I'm not gonna lead this fucking revolution. You expect me to do that? You're watching me for the wrong reason. I'm not here to sell you the revolution. The revolution is not going to be televised. No, the revolution starts with you. You do the revolution. You have to start the revolution. You have to accelerate the revolution. You have to continue the revolution. You have to fucking push the revolution and keep pushing that revolution until there is no more revolution to be had. Unless you're a Trotskyist, then that shit goes on forever. Shit. No, thank you. I think it would be nice to be able to see a better world in our lifetime, for fuck's sake, Leon Trotsky. Okay. But what I'm trying to say is that, like, you should push for the dismantlation of capitalism and the death of the U.S. empire. In addition to that, you should push for the reconstruction of a society that is better, healthier, and thriving for those who have been disenfranchised, marginalized, colonized by the empire that we live under today. And I want to make one last thing clear, like, and I'm going to end this. I'm going to end it, well, after I'm going to read comments, but I'm going to read your chat. But one last thing I want to say before I end this. The U.S. empire, when I say that it's going to collapse, I don't mean that we should make it collapse. It's gonna collapse. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The U.S. empire is gonna collapse. Every empire collapses at some point. Rome was the longest lasting empire, as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong on that. But it lasted 1,000 years. You know, empires tend to last like roughly 200 to 300 years. And we're like pretty close to that mark. Pretty dang close, if you ask me. So when the empire collapses, whether we do it or the state collapses on its own, we need to be there with our privilege, with our platform, with our resources, that the country that we are born in, as born U.S. citizens, we need to give all that we can fucking give to those who have been colonized and marginalized, who have been expropriated from, those who have been robbed from, of their democracy, of their livelihood, of their security. We need to help them. And we need to, by God, hope that their survival means our survival too. I don't know. I feel like still there's gonna be some leftist jackass in the comments who's gonna take offense to this. They're probably gonna see my comments on Vosh and blow it completely the fuck up. And they're gonna take it out of context and not understand where I am coming from on this. And again, when I critique white leftists, I'm critiquing myself as well. I am also a victim, not a victim, that's not the word I'm looking for. I am a product of the very thing that I am critiquing. And if you think that I, calling myself out on this excuses me from this, then you're no better than a Vosh supporter. Because if by me making these statements, you feel the need to defend me from any accusation of any reactionary bullshit that I may do that hurts the movement by chance, then you are not holding me accountable to my standard as much as you are not holding Vosh to the standards of working class revolutionary action. And praxis needs to be taken into account. Always. Praxis is when we put theory into practice. I want to thank y'all for coming. I'm going to read your chat now. I apologize for the audio issue in the beginning. But yeah, let's see. I see Tempest. Hello, Tempest. Serena, it's good to see you again. I apologize, Serena, for the audio. That was my bad. But we did get it fixed up quite fast. Thank you, Tempest, for the compliment on my eyelashes. Yes, but I don't know. I did use mascara today, and I also did use a lot of fucking eyeliner. You can see how much eyeliner I put. I got like wings for days. But yeah. Anyway, let's see. Jesse says, I'd also agree with the others in the chat. Compared to the loudness of music, the audio is very quiet. My apologies. Phoenix Rising, hello, cute wig. This ain't no wig, friend, but I appreciate the compliment. I don't take that as an insult. I like wigs. I don't wear them myself, but I know friends who do like to wear wigs enthusiastically, and they look very beautiful in the wigs. But this is no wig. Let me try. See? Not a wig. I'm also still reading chat. My septum ring? My goodness. This septum ring is ancient history right there. Funny story. We're winding down. It's fine if you want to stay, if you want to go. But I'm going to just rant about stuff and just read the chat and kind of like go down. So yeah, the story of the septum ring. I'm going to announce the story. So it goes like this. My ex and I were in like City Walk and in Hollywood, Universal Studios, and there's a Hot Topic there, and my ex has a septum ring already, and she allegedly put it on herself. She didn't get it done professionally, and she said she was able to do it just fine with no problem, though it hurt a bit. She's not professional. And I, for some reason, thought that what she was saying was true. Like, I could just go ahead and buy this and do it myself, homemade, whatever. Don't do that. So, we went back to her place, that night, and we boiled not only the septum ring for like about an hour, but also a safety pin, which we put in first, and it already hurt really bad. But then she took the ring and she took the safety pin that was already in my nose, and the idea was with that, as she was taking out the safety pin, she was gonna kind of like do like a maneuver, kind of. I don't know if that makes sense, like a, you know, pin ring in the nose. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, then all of a sudden, like, the hole closed, and she had to break a new hole with the bare ring. It was fucking awful. This is not the same ring, however. I actually ended up losing that ring, and I ended up getting it done professionally, again, because it was getting infected. So, moral of the story, get it done professionally. Anyway, let's continue reading. A lot of white leftists, as what's revealed in the slandering of Professor Flowers, also seem to have a white man's burden complex. You know, this is one of the things I'm actually very grateful that Deadman Animations had kind of cleared up for me. I think early 2020, I did a live stream with him, and again, I'm still very thankful for both of the times that Deadman has been on stream with me, because every time he's been on stream, it's been very educational and informative. And the first stream that we did together, he briefly spoke about the concept of white guilt, and I think it makes sense, because like, when white people feel guilty or, you know, burdened of being white, then it implies that there is a guilt, that you are guilty, that you've done something, that you as a white person have done something, so therefore you feel guilt. I think it's good that you recognize your place in society, but you should also look to learn about it instead of feeling guilty about systemic issues. You know, you should look to seek, like, preventing those systemic issues from prevailing. I think guilt is performative. I think guilt doesn't help at all. It doesn't create. It doesn't. It is a performativity of what could be genuine accountability for anything that you've done in your past. That may be like active racism or otherwise. I think it's more important to recognize your role in the racist society and to try to counteract that instead of all that shit. Jamie, I see you. We're all gay here, friends. I'm pretty gay. Are you gay? We gay. I see you, Jamie. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in ages. Feel free to DM me if you want to. You don't have to. Don't feel obligated to. Anyway, let's continue. And that was a good comment there, Phoenix Rising 87. That was a good comment. I appreciated that one. Whiskers Scuttle Bum. I've seen you for years. Meow. I couldn't have said it better, Phoenix. Keep in mind, I'm also oppressed by this system in a bunch of ways. So yeah, also I avoid debate bro mentalities. Yeah, I don't think there needs to be more to be said there. I think you said it best. Good time to pipe up How Nonviolence Protect the State by Peter Gellerlew. Definitely recommend that one. I'm going to try to put these links of books and stuff that I've mentioned in the description after the stream. Vosh recently defended and platformed an Israeli ethno-nationalist. Are you fucking serious? I thought I briefly heard about that, but I didn't hear much about it. Does he seriously? Are you fucking serious? God damn, what the fuck? Let's see, and then where they have defended Zionism? I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know, I think that's exactly the case. Instance where we're slandered by they believe they are like white chauvinists in left sometimes. That's a good observation as well. It was VTuber aristocracy. I heard about VTuber aristocracy, but I don't watch them because that's cringe. Anyway, and then the rest of it is Jamie just having fun in chat. Oh. Anyway, friends, it is about time we end the stream, but I want to say goodbye, and I do appreciate you listening to me. You're all wonderful. You're all very cute, and I hope that none of y'all take this video as an attack, but more so as like a critique for all of us to grow and to learn. Take care, friends. Bye.